Hello everyone and welcome back to Granted Gardens. My name is Melissa. Today we are going to be processing some ham. Every once in a while I'll go to our local butcher and just kind of browse and see what they have available. And a couple weeks ago I had gone to our local butcher to get like dinner for that night, and when I was there I was kind of looking in their markdown section. They have like this freezer with like markdown stuff, and in it they had ham ends that were extremely cheap. It was like a couple dollars for like big chunks of ham. So I was really not sure what qualified necessarily as ham ends. Like I could imagine what that counts as. I assumed it was like the bottom half of the leg. But I didn't really know the details to it. But I figured, worst case scenario, it's soup, right? So I picked it up. It was frozen, so I didn't really have like a good idea of like how much meat was going to be on it or anything like that. So I came home, put them in the freezer, figured I would just cross that bridge on another day. So today I decided that I was going to process them. Well, I took them out of the freezer a couple days ago, let them thaw, and looked at it, and there was actually quite a bit of meat on these bones. And I was just really concerned about why it was so cheap. So I spent some time doing homework on what the concept of ham ends are. First, when you Google like what are ham ends and start on that whole path, there's this story that seems to get shared across a lot of platforms. I don't know if it's just like one of those old wives' tales or whatnot, but the story goes that this girl was fixing dinner for her husband, and that she cut off like the ham ends of the chunk of ham because it was just something that her mother had always done. And so apparently she like goes to her mother and she's like, hey, I'm out of curiosity, like why did you always cut off the ham ends? And she said, I don't know, like it's just what your grandmother always did. And then so she goes to her grandmother and she's like, why did you always cut the ham ends off of the ham? And her grandma strictly said, because it just didn't fit in my pan. And so there was this like concept of how over so many years of just pure tradition, people would cut off the ham ends, that people do it all the time now and they don't exactly know why they're doing it. They just do it because that's how it's always been done. And so I started, doing a little bit more research. There's actually quite a bit of recipes out there for ham ends. And I kind of came to this conclusion that the ham ends are usually just kind of like scrapped because they're more of a hassle to deal with than they're worth. So from a butcher's standpoint, it just makes more sense for them to cut them off and sell them for cheap than it would make for them to have to. Like they can't get nice clean cuts out of it. It doesn't look quite as pretty. There's some people that say that the meat is a little saltier. I'm sure everyone kind of has their own take on ham ends. My initial thought behind it was that it came more from a religious standpoint. I know that there's a lot of religions, or maybe even people like just their preference, that they prefer not to eat parts of animals that are close to their feet or the ground, that it's considered, not the best cut, right? I guess I'll say. However, if you're homesteading and you're processing animals, granted, I didn't process these animals, but it was still a life that was given. My personal take is you use every piece of that you can. And there are people out there that eat pig feet. And if they eat pig feet, why can't I eat the ham ends? So today, what I'm running you guys through is me processing these ham ends. Initially what I did is I took them out and I started just kind of cutting away the meat off of the bone. Once I did that and I saw just how much meat there was, I was really surprised. I genuinely thought that it was going to be much more bone than there was meat on this, because you saw the price that I paid. I was astonished that there was so much meat here. And I figured it's fine, I'll just can it. So that's great. That's going to be canned meat to put up in the pantry. And then I started kind of pulling away the skin and the layer of fat from the meat. And I ended up weighing it. We ended up with 3 pounds of ham, which was stellar, I thought. Then from that point, I took the fat and the skin and the bones and tossed it in my big pot and poured some water and put in some frozen veg. And I'm going to be making broth from that. So I'm really excited to see kind of what direction this goes in and how much stuff I end up with at the end of the day. So I'm working off of the Ball canning book as far as canning my ham. So this next step, I'm going to take the chunks, lay them out on baking sheets, and put them in a 400-degree oven. The concept here, obviously, since the ham is already cooked, like this isn't a cooking thing. It's just to get it heated up because you don't want to pack cold meat into hot jars. I put them in the 400-degree oven for about 15 minutes. Again, this was just to get them kind of warmed up, a little golden brown on the edges. Now we're going to go ahead and pack them into jars. In order to properly fill your jars, the recipe calls for boiling broth or boiling water. Figured since we were going ahead and making our bone broth, I would just use what was available within reach. So I am going to fill this jar with the broth to cover the ham with a generous 1-inch headspace. Then we're going to prepare our jars by wiping down with vinegar so that there is a good seal with our lids, adding our lids, and putting on the rings fingertip tight, getting everything in the canner, adding water, closing and setting for 90 minutes for a total process time for quart size. All right, our 2 quarts of ham are done. So we're gonna let them sit. Next, we need to process this broth. So I have my jars ready. I'm gonna go ahead and ladle my broth in. Now I am going to run this through a strainer to get all of the bones and stuff out first. And then I'm gonna put my broth into my jars, 1-inch headspace, process 25 minutes. Here's what it looks like right now. So I'm gonna strain this and then get it in the jars. I wish I could tell you how many hours I had this going. I honestly don't have a clue. Not even a guess. I don't know what time I started it. But I can tell you my indicator for if it's gone long enough is I usually just look at the bones. So it's gonna be very hot. But like here's a really good example. You can see how the bones become very porous. So they start to look very dry. That's usually my personal indicator of when I choose to call it a day. So there's what it looks like strained. I'm gonna try and get some of the fat off the top. I just scoop it out. We're rapidly running out of counter space because I'm doing a bunch of things. Okay, so I've got my warm jar. I'm just going to ladle my broth in. I'm gonna leave 1-inch headspace. This is fairly simple and straight to the point. All right, and that got us hot 4 quarts. So now I'm gonna take some vinegar and I'm gonna wipe off those lips, the rims of each of these jars really good because that was definitely a fatty broth. I mean, there was definitely a lot of pork fat in there. So this is going to, that vinegar is gonna break through any of those fats or that grease that are on the rims of your jars and make sure that there's nothing there to inhibit the seal on your lids. All right, the next I'm gonna go ahead and add my lids. So this is a per jar. I'm making sure I actually use a per lid for the per jar. The rest of them are Ball. I have had instances in the past where I've tried to use Ball lids on per jars and it didn't seal, so I just don't risk it. Screw on lids fingertip tight. right, and then we got to get them in the canner. Dumped out my old water. Get these guys all tucked in tight. Luckily, it's a perfect amount for my canner. Okay, so we got everything completed. We had a few things go a little wrong. So for starters, one of my jars, specifically the purr jar, broke in the canner, which stinks because I lost an entire jar of broth. It does happen. It's only the second time that has ever happened to me, and I'm just coming to the conclusion that not a purr fan. So moving forward, the purr jars that I do have are going to be used for dry food storage only because I'm not taking that risk anymore. Then the jar that was next to it, one of the ball jars did not properly seal. That's not a big problem. This can just go in the refrigerator. We will use it. We use broth regularly. But my other 2 jars of broth sealed perfectly fine, and my canned ham did perfect. So I'll show you guys what we got. So this is what we ended up with, and I'm super happy with it. I am bummed about that jar, not even gonna lie to you. But I am happy with this. So this was a total of 4 quarts of broth and then 2 quarts of canned ham. Now this canned ham is like, even just 1 jar is plenty. It's definitely more than 1 meal, hands down, even for 2 people eating it. And then these jars of broth, I mean, this could easily be a couple meals just for me in 1 jar, or at least, you know, a meal between the 2 of us if we split it. Tyler's not a big soup eater, so usually I'm the one that's going through the broth, but we do use broth for a lot of other things. So I would say there's easily 7 meals right here. If we had the other jar, that would be 8. And I'm super thrilled with it. I paid $3.86 for those 2 big chunks of ham ends, and this is what I got out of it, plus another jar. But well worth it for sure. I mean, you couldn't touch anything like this in the stores for that cheap, especially not this much. In a lot of cases, you're paying a couple dollars just for a portion of canned ham. So this is fabulous. I'm extremely happy with how it turned out. So I just want to encourage you guys not to walk away from the deals. You need to be able to look at them, and you need to be able to see them for what you can do with them, not for exactly what they look like. A few weeks ago, Tyler and I had gotten pork bellies from our local Food Lion, and I was just surprised at how many people that weren't buying them. We ended up curing them and then smoking them and making bacon out of them. And by the time that we did, we were saving so much money on bacon. And we have all the tools, and so we can just process it, throw it in the freezer, and take it out as we need. And I just thought it was funny. I said, Tyler, I don't understand why people aren't buying this. And the reality of it is that people don't know what to do with it. You get something like that, and they think, oh, you know, I don't know what to do with this, or, oh, you know, in this case, oh, and ham end probably doesn't have that much meat on it, and then I'm gonna end up with a bunch of bone, and it's just gonna be a waste. I'm paying for a bone that I'm not gonna be able to use. If you know how to properly use these things, you can get a real bang for your buck. So if you walk away from anything from this video, just walk away with that encouragement. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I look forward to sharing more with you soon.